Welcome to Ridgewood Talks. Through this podcast, we'll be introducing you to some of the leaders and legends in our village. We'll keep you updated about fascinating local events, and we'll dig into the town's hot topics and so much more. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Jeannie Johnson, the founder of Ridgewood Talks and Ridgewood Walks. The goal of these initiatives is to create a kinder, more connected, and a more vibrant community. I'm thrilled to be co-hosting this podcast with my good friend and all-around wonderful guy, Jordan Kaufman. We look forward to meeting with you weekly, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on who and what you'd like to learn about in our beautiful hometown. Enjoy this episode, and until we meet again, be kind and do good.
Hey, Jordan, how you doing?
Doing well. Enjoying the weather. We got an election coming up.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good and appropriate time to really thank our guest running for council, running for one of two seats this year's ballot for Village Council. We really want to thank him for taking the time to join us today and talk a little bit about some of the questions that we've got. And here's some of the answers and value that he's planning on bringing to our community.
Well, before we go into that, I just want to point out that we invited everybody, to all the council candidates, to be on the podcast. And we also had identical questions for everyone. To kick it off, are you ready, Mr. Weitz?
Absolutely. And thank you so much.
You're so welcome. In your opinion, what are the most pressing issues facing the village?
So first, thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Jeannie, for the opportunity to speak on this stuff. It really is critically important, and anything we can do to get folks more informed about the election on November 8th, I'm all for. So thank you guys for doing that. So with that, there are a couple of priorities I have if I get to the council. So first and foremost, I really want to revitalize our downtown. And I think the biggest thing we can do to revitalize our downtown is to bring back the pedestrian mall. And this is a key point because this is an area where not all the candidates agree. I know Siobhan and I really favor it, and the other candidates don't. But when my wife and I moved to Ridgewood, we really moved here because of the sense of community. And there was, if there's anything good that came out of COVID, and there was almost nothing good, but if there's anything good that came out of it, really was that sense of community you had when you got to walk down Ridgewood Avenue, see your friends, see your neighbors, invite friends from other towns to really enjoy what's so great about Ridgewood and the central business district. And I was so happy when I saw so many other towns like Summit, Westfield, and Red Bank kept their pedestrian malls, that I assumed Ridgewood would do the same. And last summer, it was just an absolute ghost town downtown. We were missing that sense of community. We were missing that vital downtown that I think lured so many of us to Ridgewood in the first place, and one of the things that makes this place so special. In addition to the sense of community, it also increased foot traffic for our retail businesses, which were struggling downtown. It significantly increased restaurant capacity for the warmer months. If you talk to any of the restaurant owners, and there's so many of them downtown, they make all their money between Memorial Day and Labor Day. And to be able to attract more people from out of town and to seat more people was really a boon for them as well. And again, attracted visitors to downtown Ridgewood who may have otherwise not come, because of the lure that was the pedestrian plaza. And finally, it was a win-win, because what it did was ultimately that's going to drive up the value of that property downtown, which contributes to our tax base, and means that we could take some of the burden off of Ridgewood taxpayers, because if the businesses are making more money, they should pay more in property taxes. Now, I know some retailers did object, or a handful of businesses, and I would certainly work with them to see how we can limit anything negative or perceived negative that they got out of the pedestrian mall. But at the end of the day, we really need to bring that back. And I think it's one of the key things we need to revitalize and clean up our downtown. In addition to downtown, I also feel really strongly against overdevelopment. Again, when my wife and I came here, we really came here because of the unique character of the village, and really need to preserve that. And I feel really strongly that any new development in Ridgewood must be carefully scrutinized and match the character of the village and be in the best interest of the current residents. Now, the next council is going to need to deal with this, and we need to have smart people on the council that were willing to make decisions. You can't put the village in a snow globe and just pretend it's going to stay the same forever. Change is inevitable, but as we change and as we develop, we have to do so in a smart way. And I think that's an area where I could really, I really can add value. And I want to be really clear on my priority here is that, I want to make sure that the next generation of Ridgewood residents inherit a place just as beautiful as the Ridgewood that all of us inherited when we chose to make a life here. Finally, I also feel strongly about better services. Again, one of the things that makes Ridgewood special is the amount of services we get from our municipal government. And there are a couple of things we can just do better. So first, hybrid access to village council meetings is something I feel strongly about. The Board of Education makes it very easy for parents to participate in their Board of Ed meetings if they can't physically make it to the building. You can Zoom into those meetings, participate. Virtually every private sector company at this point has now using Zoom or similar technology to allow folks to attend meetings virtually. Yet our current village council has elected to not use Zoom and make it harder for people to access democracy. This to me really matters. You have people with disabilities, you have people who are older, you have people with young kids, folks who are so COVID sensitive. We should making the tent bigger and make participating in democracy easier, not making harder, which is what I think we did when we said no to hybrid access. Similarly, we need to maximize use of our fields for our kids and communities. One of the things I feel strongly about is the Shedler project should be done already. That has an extra field for our kids to use. It is, a bit of embarrassment that the project has taken so long and is still not finished. I also think we need to do things to minimize flooding on some of those fields and do what we can to protect activities like pickleball for some of our other folks as well. But this is an area where we can just do a better job. I also want to see more responsiveness from some of our village services. One of the things that really drives me crazy is the state of our roads. When you drive in from Glen Rock or you drive in from Wyckoff, there's a noticeable difference the moment you enter into Ridgewood in terms of the number of potholes, the quality of our streets. That just shouldn't be. And that's, I think, in something where the tone from the top really needs to change at Village Hall to make sure that we get things like that, basic blocking and tackling of good government fixed. And finally, I feel really strong about supporting police, fire, and EMS. We need to make sure that the people that keep us safe have all the tools that they need to do their job well and to do their job right.
Thanks so much, Evan, for walking us through so many, a lot of pressing issues that Ridgewood has, really putting in a condensed format for, I think, a lot of the listeners to get a taste on some of the things, because everyone probably has a couple on their list that they would have from that. But that's a pretty extensive list right there of kind of a lot of the issues which have been talked about in the town and that some who are very involved know about. Maybe some of our listeners who either just moved to town or haven't been as involved because they're running from kids' sport and stuff like that aren't up on. So thanks for sharing all of those issues. What we want to ask you as a follow-up to that, what do you think is the most important skill in being an effective council person?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think the most important thing, there are two things I want to highlight is the first is listening to the community and the second is civility. And I think we've gotten away from both of those in recent history. In terms of listening to the community, I think public officials tend to talk too much. I think they, and hopefully I could say we someday, need to listen more. I feel really strong about being accessible to the village residents and hearing what they have to say and listening to them and not just thinking that I know everything. That's just not the case. Again, it goes back to, I think, why hybrid access is so important. I want to hear from more voices in the community, not less. And certainly if I'm on the council, I plan on making myself accessible to, everyday citizens to understand what's going on in the village and see what people are worried and concerned about. Also, I think civility is a really important skill. And again, it's something we've really gotten away from. I think the art of being able to disagree without being disagreeable is something we've lost. There will be times when I disagree, extensively with some of my colleagues on the council, but I can guarantee you we'll never get nasty, it'll never get personal. And so the vitriol that we've seen out of the current council or previous councils in recent memory, to me, it's really unacceptable. We need to go back to remembering that at the end of the day, we're all neighbors. We all want what's best for Ridgewood. And that's something that I carry with me, every time I step up into Village Hall.
I like what you're saying there, and thank you. One of the questions that I hear it often is, what is the Faulkner Act? And so I want to know what your understanding of the Faulkner Act is.
Yeah, no, another great question. And I'm going to, I guess, put on my legal hat a little bit and talk a little bit about the Faulkner Act, but hopefully distill it down to kind of the things that people really just need to know. So the Faulkner Act is a New Jersey state statute that dictates how municipalities like Ridgewood organize their government. And we in Ridgewood have chosen one of those options that we call the village format, which is why we're the Village of Ridgewood. It's based upon our style of government as defined within the Faulkner Act. And what the village format calls for in our case is the election of council people who then elect a mayor and then a deputy mayor of the village. So right now we have 5 council people. And there's elections every 2 years and they alternate. So, this year, 2 seats are up, in 2 years, 3 seats are up, in 4 years, two seats are up, and so on and so forth. And after every election, every 2 years, is a reorganization meeting. And at that reorganization meeting, amongst the 5 council people, they elect within those 5 who will be mayor and then who will be deputy mayor. So it's almost a bit like Parliament, where the parliamentarians actually dictate who's going to lead the body. And that's the way the council works. I think what's interesting, what a lot of folks don't appreciate, and again, something we've really gotten away from, I think, in the last few years, is there is no executive power in the mayor or the deputy mayor. The way I view it is we are basically a board of directors. We are there to make decisions, to vote on the budget, but at the end of the day, we leave the day-to-day running to village employees. And I liken the village manager as basically the CEO who is responsible to us as the board of directors on the council. And I view our role within the council under the Faulkner Act is to hire good people, and then we hold them accountable for making sure that the needs of the village are being met and the residents are well served. And if they're not, then we make decisions that may be to the contrary. But at the end of the day, we're not there to run the village ourselves under the Faulkner Act, and we're not there to substitute our judgment for the professionals that we hire to run the day-to-day workings of the village. And we're not there to exercise executive power under the Faulkner Act. Our role is as the board of directors, and again, hire smart people, set an agenda, and then hold them accountable for meeting that agenda and the needs of the village.
So I just want to do a quick follow-up to that. Everyone on the council holds the same amount of power. In other words, the deputy mayor and the mayor they don't have any extra duties, or they don't hold any extra power over the other council people. Is that correct?
Right. So, the mayor and the deputy mayor get to set the agenda at the meetings and run the meetings, which is important because, what gets on the agenda is important. I think there are a couple other ministerial things, like I think they get to marry folks where some of the council people, I think, don't. But to your point, absolutely, at the end of the day, they're basically first amongst equals, but all 5 council people run the village together.
Because our next question is, if you ever found yourself in an ethical dilemma, describe the ethical dilemma that you faced, how you resolved it.
Yeah, so it's a great question. It really goes to the heart of things that I feel really strongly about. So I can tell you probably the best professional advice I've ever received in my life is that your reputation is the most important thing that you have. And I put character and integrity above everything else. Nothing matters more than that. And to me, part of that is not just avoiding any impropriety or conflict of interest. Our elected officials, even ourselves in day to day, we need to avoid even any appearance of impropriety or conflict of interest. And that to me really matters. Perception matters, and we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And really, integrity is key. As I think we were chatting offline about I spent the first half of my career in public service as a prosecutor, and that's really what I probably still identify most as a criminal prosecutor. I got out of law school, spent several years in the Manhattan DA's office handling violent crimes, the domestic violence unit, crimes against children, and then ultimately went on to the Department of Justice, where I handled white collar, complex financial and white collar crimes. And when you're a prosecutor, you learn very quickly about something called the Brady Rule. And the Brady Rule says that if you're aware of any evidence that potentially shows that a defendant is innocent, you have to turn that evidence over to the defense attorney. It's not optional; it is required. And failure to do so is not only not doing your job, it's an injustice. And the problem, though, is sometimes you look at a piece of information and you wonder, does this really help the defendant or not? Because if it helps the defendant, you got to turn it over. But sometimes there may be something that may be innocuous, maybe not, but you don't know because you don't know what the defense is going to argue. And we always follow something called, at least I always followed something called the 10-second rule when it came to Brady, what we call Brady material, which was if I had to think about it for more than 10 seconds, I just turned it over. I just wanted to avoid even an appearance of impropriety or that I was hiding evidence from the defense. So to me, if it was something that there was even a straight-faced argument or even anything that took me more than 10 seconds to think through, on the 10 seconds, I said, you know what, I'm not even going to continue, just turn it over and have an open book. And so what I've always followed in my day-to-day life and when I take with me to the village, that if it's a close call, recuse yourself. If there's something that's going to bring, dishonor onto the village or even an appearance of dishonor or anything that could besmirch your integrity, just recuse yourself or do what's ethically right, even if it may be personally difficult. And so that's always something I've followed in my personal life and my professional career, and something that I'll certainly take with me to the village hall.
That's good. I'd like to know why you think you're the best person for this position.
So there are a lot of smart people in Bergen County, and there are only 4 of us running. A lot of smart people in Ridgewood, but I do think that I'm qualified for the role and something that I think I'd be very good at. I think one of the things that separates me from some of the other candidates is I'm the only candidate who's gotten both success and results in both the public and the private sector. As I mentioned, I spent the first 13 and a half, 14 years of my career as a prosecutor. I was responsible for some of the biggest cases brought by the Department of Justice in the New York City area in the decade that I spent as a federal prosecutor. It involved leading large teams of agents. It involved getting results for crime victims. It's something that, I received a number of awards for, and something that I remain eminently proud of to this day. About 8 years ago, I went to the private sector, where I quickly became a managing director of one of the largest banks in the world. And in the private sector, I've had to manage very large teams. I've had to kind of cut through sort of corporate speak and get results in a large corporate environment. And I think really that experience of being able to get results both in public and private sectors does set me apart, and I think will make me really successful on the council village. On the village council. I will say, in general, I'm fair. I'm detail orientated, but at the end of the day, I like results. I want to see, results that benefit this village and benefit the residents, and that's something that I'm going to fight for.
Thanks for that description is very helpful and leads us to a next question that I think also adds some light into what kind of person you'd be on the village council, which is, how do you describe your management style?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so going back to some stuff I said before, it's a great question, but I don't think we manage on the village council. We're not day-to-day managers, and I think that's something we need to remind ourselves, that we're there to set an agenda and then hold people accountable for that. With that, I've had a tremendous amount of management experience. When I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I was a supervisor of other lawyers. I've had a number of opportunities, had to direct large teams of agents as part of cases. In the private sector, I've had teams that were numbering in the several hundreds that have reported it to me. So I generally have a tremendous amount of management experience. In terms of things that I've learned, and if I could say quickly kind of the way that I do manage when it's appropriate, I abhor micromanaging. It drives me crazy. I'm going to follow the same rule to council that I follow when in the private sector. My job is to hire smart people, give them direction and support, make sure they have the tools to get the job done, but then again, hold them accountable for getting results. And that's the way that I operate in the private sector, and that's the way I think you should operate on the village council. Finally, I will just say that I generally have 2 rules that I always remember when it comes to management. First is, I will work just as hard as the people that I manage. There's nothing better than showing them by example what you expect in terms of work ethic, and I hold myself to that standard. And I'm always a big fan of the golden rule of praise in public and only criticize in private.
It's a good one. I learned that when I was raising my kids.
So the last question we have for you today, Evan, is how do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in our town?
Yeah, another great question. That comes back again, I think, to hybrid access, increasing the voices that we hear from. Again, really being available to citizens, making myself available through email, potentially office hours. But I want to make sure that the residents, the residents have my ear. I need to make sure of that. I also think that one of the really most important things is that we have a village council that represents the village as a whole. And, as I mentioned before, if I'm on the council, I'll be the only village council member with kids in our schools. I'll be the only member of the council that knows what it's like to commute to Manhattan on a regular basis. And I think that really gives me an opportunity to speak for a really large number of families in the village that really haven't had people with that experience sitting on the council in the past. And I think by having a rich diversity of backgrounds on the council and places where we are in life, I think only makes the council a better place. And again, gives me a bit of an insight into, kind of the day-to-day life of a lot of the people that we serve. And something, again, that I'll bring to Village Hall when I'm elected.
Terrific. Well, I'm very appreciative that you took the time to be with us today on this podcast. And I hope that we'll tell all your friends to listen to it. I hope that we have a lot of listeners. I hope that the listeners will have taken part in the debate. I hope that our listeners will go and research every single one of the candidates. It's Siobhan Winograd, Evan Weitz.
Thank you.
We have incumbent Susan Knudsen and we have James Van Gore. So I don't know what everyone's website addresses are, but we will have Evans and Siobhan's posted when we post, as we are posting these. Otherwise, I would make sure that we had the other candidates, but it's out there somewhere. So please try and find it. We here at Ridgewood Talks want to make sure that everyone makes an educated decision when they go to the voting booth. And that's why we wanted to have the candidates on. So Evan, can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here.
Yeah,
thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go on,
No,
Jason.
no. I mean, I'm just going to echo the same thing Jeannie said, which is, thank you so much for coming on, for lending your time. We know all the candidates have been hard at work, kind of picking and choosing some of the mediums that they want to have discussions. So we really thank you for coming on and taking the time to answer the questions and chat with us. And also just want to reiterate what Jeannie said, which is a big thing that motivates us here is to get residents of the town to know more about the issues that are going on, to know more about just how your town is managed, both from a structural standpoint to also the people who are involved, and just kind of create more conversation around that. So we're not just having dogmatic discussions. And I think that this has really been helpful to elevate the level of conversation that we're having when we're talking about things that are happening locally. So I want to thank you for that, Evan, in bringing so many things to light.
Yeah, and listeners, I just want to remind you that we have some really interesting people on the docket for us. We have the Federated HSA President Mary McCallie coming on. She'll talk to us about all of the events that are happening at the school this year. And actually, we're really going to kind of dig into some of the issues that are still being resolved as a result of COVID. So I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. And then, we have another series that we're kind of tagging off of what Jordan is he's a Ridgewood High School graduate who has decided to move back to Ridgewood and to serve his community. So we have a couple of other people that are in that same demographic. We are going to be talking to Diane O'Brien, who is a city planner in New York City, and she's also lended her expertise to the planning board here in Ridgewood, and she was very instrumental in getting our master plan together. And so we're going to talk to her about some of the highlights of that and what Ridgewood can look forward to as we roll out some of the I guess, what would you call it, Jordan? The ideas, the recommendations from the master plan. That's what we're going to be taking a look at with Diane. And then we're going to be talking to Carly, who is the business manager over at the Benjamin and the NOMA. She is does a lot over there. She's a Ridgewood High School graduate. She graduated with Jordan the same year. So we're going to talk to her about some of the things there. We know that the residents of both of those housing units were given a survey recently on what they want to see in Ridgewood. So it kind of ties in with the master plan and how we can sort of expedite some of those things that our residents really want. So
just to
those conversations.
So it's elements of the master plan. Elements.
Thank you. Okay, good. What did I say it was?
I don't think you threw a label on it. I think we were, but it describes it as elements. So.
Okay, so that's perfect. So we're going to use that professional wording, which is the right thing to do. And I would imagine at some point, I haven't asked him formally, but, he has been on this podcast before. He is a Ridgewood High School graduate. He is now a county commissioner. So I would imagine at some point we'll have Ramon Heshe back on. I've talked to Jim Stroker, and we're excited to have him come on the podcast. So, listener or listeners, in my hope that you will tune in and find out about the leaders and legends of this village, and also hear about the town's hot topics as we dig into them. So hasta la vista until we meet again, everyone. Thank you so much.